Hey there, Andrew Farr here, managing editor of Water Finance and Management Journal, and thanks everyone for tuning in today. I have a great guest joining me, Luis Montestruque, Vice President of Digital Solutions at Xylem. And Luis, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Andrew. Great to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I were talking a little bit earlier about what we were going to discuss today, and we thought that wet weather management would be a really good topic to get into, and specifically some of Xylem's tools and solutions, your BLU-X solution that is geared towards wet weather management and data collection and analysis, and that sort of thing. But maybe to start us off here, obviously there's been a lot of talk across the water sector on the COVID-19 pandemic and everything that's going on from an operations standpoint. We're hearing about revenue loss. Wet weather management, on the other hand, though, is certainly been an issue for utilities for a long time. We hear about these big consent decrees that utilities are under. They have these big programs to address a lot of this. Talk a little bit about what you see as some of the big challenges across the industry, regarding wet weather management, regarding sewer overflows and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Reflecting a little bit on the last couple of decades, I think that we have seen quite a big evolution when it comes to how utilities manage wet weather issues. And aggravating those, of course, are issues related to affordability, but also changes in regulation, changes in climate, how rainfall patterns affects different cities. Um, and throughout that evolution, we have seen how we have transitioned from a gray infrastructure focus, traditional, a typical year approach to additional ways of dealing with wet weather issues that make it more affordable, that allow utilities to do more with less, and to provide a greater quality of life for their ratepayers. And in that regard, I think we have seen a couple of things emerge. One of them is gray infrastructure, for example, as a way of utilizing nature-based technologies to
Mhm.
deal with the issues of wet weather management. But also what I call blue infrastructure or smart infrastructure, infrastructure that uses data to try to address those problems. At the end, the motivation for these new technologies is still, how do we maximize existing infrastructure, existing assets? How do we adjust the infrastructure that is static, that is mostly driven by gravity, to the realities of climate change, where we see great variability of rainfall patterns and things like that? And how do we utilize those dollars that are spent in infrastructure to elevate the quality of life of those ratepayers? Um, and so, when we look at these technologies, especially on the digital side, we see that uh, there has been great advances in a number of different areas that are not wet weather related. We can probably find the nearest empty parking spot in downtown. Yet, even though some of these programs are the largest capital infrastructure improvement in the city's history, we don't have a clear understanding of how they actually work and where water is going at any moment in time. So, what we really need is to modernize and apply all of that digital knowledge that has been developed for other parts of the city life to this system. And if you really think about it, it's kind of a smart traffic light system for sewers, right? You have rainfall falling in one part of the city and not the other. We need a dynamically connected configurable sewer system that can reflect those realities. So it is definitely exciting times because the technologies now are becoming much more affordable and available to utilities.
Yeah, and so with that being said, as I mentioned before, Xylem's BLU-X solution, that's really, what that's geared towards is better collection of data, better analysis of it, being able to give operators these kind of visual cues to help them understand and regulate the sewer system better. Talk a little bit about BLU-X, how that was developed and what as I mentioned, kind of what that's really geared towards addressing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of great stories start, an unlikely encounter. A professor from civil engineering and a professor from electrical engineering at the University of Notre Dame got together one day and they thought, hey, all of these technologies that are currently being developed for um, wireless sensing, distributed sensing, and control, all of these technologies can be utilized for monitoring what is happening in sewers and provide the level of control that is required to avoid these overflows. So the idea then was to find a utility that can help us launch that. And the city of South Bend was the first one that jumped on this idea, and we were able to implement it there. And the solution really has three parts to it, and they follow the same story, whether it is in South Bend or Cincinnati or Grand Rapids or Buffalo. They start with what we call turning on the lights, where we deploy a number of different wireless real-time sensors that can tell us the level and flow of what is happening underground.
Mm-hmm.
Then we utilize a digital twin that can help us predict when we see an incoming rainfall event. It can help us predict what are the possible outcomes of the system. And then we utilize a dynamic optimization system that mimics how the stock exchange operate to sort of trade in real time sewer capacity away from areas that are um, at capacity or nearing capacity and to areas that can deal with the extra flows. Um, it turns out this technology can also be used for wastewater treatment plants, but it follows the same process of turning on the lights, predict with a digital twin, and then an action that in some cases takes the form of a dashboard, and some other cases it is a automatic control system that allows the systems to maximize their capacity and therefore reduce overflows. But perhaps one of the things that we discovered early on was critical as the technology was how do we ensure these systems are sustainable, that they can be owned and utilized by utilities. And we discovered that co-designing the system, leveraging all the infrastructure and investments that the city have made are really critical as part of this process. We call that the glass box approach. It really enables us to go deep with the utility and understand the unique challenges that they have and tailor a solution that addresses their problem.
Yeah, and so with that said, can you talk about some examples? I mean, I know you mentioned obviously being developed in city of South Bend, and you mentioned Cincinnati and Grand Rapids, or some other cities where you guys have done some work with this. Can you give us some insight as to the problems that maybe some of those utilities were dealing with, and how BLU-X was able to help?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite ones is the city of Buffalo.
Mhm.
The city of Buffalo, when they built their sewers, the city was expecting to be one of the largest ones in the country. And so, with that mind, they built sewers that have additional capacity in them to accommodate for the city growth. Um, but the reality is that the population of the city didn't increase to that size, and so the city still has an issue with wet weather issues. But um, what they were able to do was utilize that additional capacity on their sewers to reduce their overflows. And so, with a collection of control structures that essentially implement what I mentioned before of a smart traffic light system,
Mhm.
they were able, for example, to eliminate close to 500 million gallons of overflow over the last year by just tuning how that sewer system operates, right? Um, and effectively providing them with a solution that is as low as zero point 0.2 cents per gallon. That's the way that we evaluate the effectiveness of a solution, is
Mhm.
by understanding uh, the the number of dollars per overflow eliminated.
Yeah.
And normal solutions get you to about $1, $2 per gallon. And Buffalo has been able to do, again, with a small tweak in their sewer system, be able to reduce overflows at a cost of zero point 0.2 cents per gallon. Another great example is with Cincinnati, where they have a $3.2 billion CSO reduction or wet weather program, fairly massive
Mhm.
program for the city. And what they have been able to do with their leadership is really turn on the lights on the system, upgrade their data acquisition and intelligence on the system to reduce overflows over the last couple of years by 250 million gallons annually. Another example uh, where the cost of overflow reduction is drastically below what you will find with normal traditional solutions. In this case, at less than 1 cent per gallon. Um, and then, of course, my favorite example, simply because we have been working with them for so long, South Bend, Indiana,
Mhm.
a city of 100,000 people, um, with $1 billion program, or essentially $10,000 for every person that lives in the city, where we have been able to reduce overflows by 70%, and their contaminant of interest, E. coli, by 50% by implementing BLU-X.
Yeah.
Um, it really reflects what my kids tell me is what I do for a living, is clean rivers using computers and math.
Yeah, that's I mean that's very true. I mean, well, with those, with those examples you just mentioned, I mean that's some cities of, different sizes, and you're seeing not only the cost benefits but the environmental ones as well. Um, so I guess, to maybe bring this to a close, Luis, like I mentioned before, a huge conversation right now across the water sector is how, our industry is basically being affected by this pandemic situation. Like I mentioned before, there's probably going to be some short and long term operational implications. Lots of financial ones. And you're hearing this conversation around technology and data, just kind of even being brought even more to the forefront. Talk a little bit about your thoughts on technology and how that's going to continue to play into resilience and planning, future planning for utilities, kind of now and in the future as we take this pandemic kind of into consideration.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great topic.
Mhm.
What we normally saw before was our utilities were really interested in making some hard business cases for utilizing technologies such as BLU-X. How many dollars per gallon are we reducing overflows by? How much are we reducing in operational expenditures, for example, for energy consumption in treatment facilities and such. And what we're seeing now is that, of course, those business cases are still very, very valid and vastly driving the adoption of these technologies. But we're also seeing a rise in prominence for issues related to the current crisis, and in particular, utilities wanting to have remote visibility over their assets. They want to see continuity plans that involve automation and resiliency through the use of technologies that allow the system to recover itself faster with a minimal intervention from external on-site resources. And these technologies certainly help in that regard, right? They provide transparency to the system. They turn on the lights in the system. They allow for continuous operation, and then ultimately they help utility managers operate their assets in a way that they can recover from issues a lot faster. So it really reduces the need for sort of maintenance on-site efforts to be able to recover. So we're looking at that kind of use case being brought up more and more these days.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, lots of benefits. There's no question about that. But as you said, it's certainly a good thing that these technologies are becoming a little bit more affordable now. That's certainly going to, changing the conversation a little bit to where they can, become a reality, and utilities can implement a lot of these. Well, Luis, I know we could probably go all day talking about all this, but let's leave it right there, and hopefully we can pick this up another time and talk a little bit more about this. But Luis, appreciate you taking the time joining me today, and great talking with you.
Great talking to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Yeah, take care.